Hello and welcome to the latest in NearForm series of podcasts. I'm your host, Emily McDade. I'm a technology communicator and I write about all different types of tech, from blockchain to robotics to software development. I'm really excited today to speak to my guest, Cian Ó'Maidin, co-founder and CEO of NearForm. We are planning to talk about topics ranging from inner sourcing to Node.js to whether or not NearForm has a dress code. Cian, thank you so much for being here. Could you tell us when you founded the company?
Hi, Emily. I founded the company, would have been at the very end of 2011. So you could really say I founded it in 2012. So it was December 20th, 2011 that I got my company registration documents back from the company registrations office. And then in 2012, really started to focus all my time on NearForm and on getting it up and running.
That's brilliant. And it's been quite a journey since then. So we're going to get into some of that in our questions. I know that your company's reputation since its founding has in part been built on your expertise with Node.js. So it's now the 10th anniversary of Node.js. And I'm just wondering, is this just the beginning and how has it grown through the past decade?
Yeah, I mean, when we started, I had this philosophical debate with one of the other founders, where I had been a classically trained computer science person, and so I primarily worked on C++ and Java, writing back end pieces of software, and I had come across JavaScript back in, I suppose, 2001, 2002, and I'd had kind of a negative experience with JavaScript in that. The tools for writing JavaScript back at that time were pretty poor, and because JavaScript runs within the browser and it's it's an asynchronous programming model, I'd been pretty frustrated with it. And then I met my co-founder, and he was all about Node.js and writing full stack JavaScript applications, and I instantly was like, oh no, not that toy language thing. But we did an experiment, which was we worked on a project which was the Sunday Business Post. So they had a tiny budget back in 2011 to rebuild their e-commerce and mobile news experience, and Richard and one of his friends rebuilt the entire experience in 12 weeks. Like 1.5 people, and I was
Wow.
I was sold at that stage. I can get over syntax and all of those things when you if you can go faster, then you can figure out the tools, I guess, at a later stage. But when we started NearForm, Node.js was 2 years old. It was very hipster. As in, most people were talking about it. Nobody was really doing it. And the technology, I mean, with the Sunday Business Post, I think we went into production on Node 0.4. So this is like way, way, way pre kind of commercial release of the technology. And so, back in those days, it was a bit of a Wild West. There was this huge number of modules published to the central package manager, and you really, anything that you decided to embed in your software, you really kind of had to be quite clinical when looking at whether there were a good number of maintainers working on it. Essentially, if something isn't actively maintained or hasn't the signs that there's a community around it, if you use it, you needed to be prepared to maintain it yourself. But that said, we were able to build things really, really quickly. And we were able to get to a point where we had enough revenue coming in that we could pay our wages and go from there. I mean,
so as the language has evolved, that community has now strengthened.
Oh yeah. There was an inflection point late 2013 where Node.js went from literally we could identify, like, on one hand when we started off, the number of companies who were using the technology in production. End of 2013, we had PayPal and Walmart both announced that as part of their transformation projects. Walmart were trying to start to become more competitive with the likes of Amazon and various online technology companies, and PayPal had reached this kind of static place in terms of their GUI and their look and feel. It was almost like it had been frozen for like 10 years. I don't know if you can remember the old PayPal interface, but
it wasn't great.
yeah. And so for like PayPal, what they had achieved from a commercial point of view was very impressive, but the actual technology org had become very, very what's the word for it? It had become a bit musty and slow paced and stuff like that. So they were having a problem hiring great developers. They brought in a big wig from Netflix who was involved in all of the front end engineering in Netflix, and he brought in Node.js and full stack JavaScript into PayPal, and that just took off like wildfire in there, and they became very attractive to developers then wanting to work in a new technology where they could express ideas really, really quickly and get them into production. And so from that point in time, from kind of I suppose the beginning of 2014, our phone just started to ring off the hook with people who were, we'd clearly kind of become identified as an important company in the community around Node.js, and I guess we transitioned at that point from being the kind of potentially crazy Node.js guys to the visionaries who saw the technology before it became commercial, and we got a lot of lift from that happening as a business.
That's amazing. Such an interesting story to hear how a company goes from just a few people in the beginning to how many you are now, which I believe you're at around 150 employees now.
Yeah, a bit under 150. Yeah, I mean, it was literally like 3 or 4 people. We were very much bootstrapping and didn't have any financial buffer whatsoever when we were starting up, and we didn't have any funding or venture capital or any of that kind of stuff. And we had a couple of tough years. I mean, really, the first 3 to 3.5 years was, I can remember we'd go into Christmas. Christmas normally you're kind of hoping to wind down and relax, and the founders would be going into Christmas going, if we don't sell, X amount of projects or services in the next 6 weeks after Christmas, we're not going to be able to make payroll. We had to be pretty lean and efficient in everything that we did in order to stay alive. But again, the practice of all that stuff really served us well then as we started to scale up a bit. Like, we still had that mindset, and not forgetting where you come from, especially when the times are good, is a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that embracing open source as well as Node.js has been a huge part of the success of NearForm. Just wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. So myself, previous to NearForm, I did a startup, and we were in the Microsoft ecosystem of technologies, and ultimately, like, we had a core reliance on a commercial entity that we had no influence over. In that startup, eventually Microsoft brought the core technology platform to end of life. That's a really hard lesson to learn when you've bootstrapped and really had to invest a lot of yourself for a number of years in something that was now being effectively killed off outside of your control. And so I started using some open source around that time, some Apache projects. When we started working on NearForm and started to become involved in the actual open source community. So, very early on, we set up the first Node.js meetup in Dublin, and then decided to set up the first European NodeConf. Really kind of fell in love, I guess, with the open source community, the values of that community, and also the power of where that mindset and that way of working together on basically collaborating with people you don't know on pieces of technology that you rely upon can take you. And so, I guess NearForm became known because of our involvement in the Node.js world, but actually for us as a company, we'd see ourselves very much as an open source company, because the open source methodology and philosophy is the right way to go about building software, and all ships rise when everybody contributes to something that we share.
Yeah, I think open source has gone from, as you were sort of saying, something that's hipster or something that seems maybe risky to something that's completely mainstream and transformational for companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's not without its challenges. So, I mean, open source is not a free lunch. The folks behind JBoss, which became a Red Hat company, came out with this interesting narrative when they were on the rise as an independent company about professional open source. That kind of it made me scratch my head a little bit. It's like, so you got this open source stuff that everybody kind of puts their time into, and you create something that everyone can share. But then you have an idea of professional open source, and what does that mean? And effectively, it's like, well, if as a group of consumers who understand the value of open source technologies and the benefits it brings, if we understand that, if we want to use that then in a professional context, that we should try and think about maybe paying something into that community, and that's a really interesting concept. I mean, open source at this point is something that certainly the tech companies understand and contribute to. We're at another inflection point, I think, around the enterprise adopting open source and starting to contribute back to the projects that they're getting value from. That kind of segues into some of the work we're doing around inner source these days.
Yeah, I wonder if you could expand on that, because I don't think everybody knows yet about inner sourcing. I think it's still, people are still just learning about it, but I know that it can really transform a stale organization into a culture of innovation.
So I mean, our how we came into the inner source thing. We'd been involved with some of the folks at PayPal when we're doing this transformation and getting into Node.js. And one of the people we met at PayPal by the name of Denise Cooper, who had been she'd been CTO at Wikipedia and involved in the original Linux kernel, and some really interesting things. She'd been the head of inner source at PayPal, and as part of that role, Denise had become involved in an area called inner source. Now, inner source, what it does is, when you have large organizations that have shared pieces of software, that teams that could be geographically distributed across the open source way of working, is actually a really, really good way of collaborating on these shared pieces of software and components and things. The idea with inner source, effectively, it's bring open source practices behind the firewall, and then bring the practices about how to effectively and efficiently collaborate on shared pieces of software into an organization. So Denise Cooper from PayPal joined us at the beginning of this year. She's just written a book on inner source, which is basically a set of case studies on PayPal, Bosch, Nike, and a bunch of other big companies, and how they've adopted open source methodologies and all the benefits that they've reaped from that. But effectively, adopting the inner source book of practices enables organizations to spend a lot less time working on shared components, both from a developer perspective, but also from a management perspective. And essentially, it's like a set of design patterns for technology organizations to collaborate more effectively. So we kind of see like inner source as a thing we're doing, and we're helping a bunch of bigger companies now to adopt inner source. It's like the first step on the ladder to getting those organizations to start contributing to open source projects in a meaningful way. And that's where the big future is. We believe anyway for the open source world. If we can get all the consumers of open source to start contributing back, the future's bright.
Yeah, absolutely. After this podcast, we will put a link where people can find that book.
Yeah, let's do it. And actually, if we have a bunch of copies in the office, so maybe if folks who are listening to the podcast want to send an email, maybe the first 5 emails, we'll send you a copy of the Inner Source book.
Oh, great! Yeah, I'm sure the listeners will.
Hooray!
Will love it.
Enjoy it, whoever gets it.
Thanks for that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how, the foundations of the company, and obviously securing customer contracts was huge for your growth trajectory. So I was looking at your customer list, and Condé Nast jumped out at me because it's just such a cool brand, such a globally recognizable brand.
Yeah.
How did you get an in with some of those huge media brands in the early days?
If you're familiar with Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm a good number of years ago, and he talks about the technology adoption life cycle. And so with new technologies, you have like the really, really early adopters, kind of experimenter types that are, savvy enough from a technology perspective to be able to adopt technologies that aren't necessarily ready for the mass market yet. And so, the early days of NearForm is a story of the early adopters of Node.js, and I guess that the people that were able to find NearForm were the kind of big brain technology or technologists in some really progressive companies. Media as a market in general, print media. The writing's been on the wall for quite a number of years that print is going to decline, and the big publishers have to do something to be relevant at digital. We started, I guess, our very early days at NearForm running meetups in Dublin. Then we started the European Node Conference. We started becoming involved in some of the conferences in the United States. Literally, like the people of influence from Condé Nast were people that were attending some of those conferences, and they literally kind of came to us, and they were asking us to maybe meet them in their office in New York, and we started to do some small events with them in their office, try and help them to get a bit more visibility in the developer community in their hometown and stuff like that, and they did a lot of work to do. So they had a new platform to build for all of their brands across Condé, and then to actually launch on the individual brands on that platform. So they hired us because they knew we were some of the most talented engineering people in that open source community, and we both helped them to build a platform, and then we both helped them on top of that to launch the actual brands on top of the platform. So it's an interesting, it's kind of an unexpected surprise when you're like a tech company from the southeast of Ireland, and out of like Tramore in County Waterford, you're working on Golf Digest and Teen Vogue and publications like that. So we've been working with them for. They were really our first really serious customer in the US, kind of around the beginning of 2014.
Wow. For any small technology company to bag Condé Nast as their first American customer, that's very impressive.
Yeah.
As you were talking there, I was just picturing their building. It's such an iconic building in Manhattan.
Yeah. Number one World Trade. So actually, interestingly, they moved into the new World Trade Center, and they were the only tenant in the World Trade Center. So they were floor 20 to 40, I believe. And just after they moved in, we ran what we think was the first event or conference in that building, which was a Node. We called it Node Day, and we were on like I think the 37th floor. We had like Vogue were upstairs and various other media brands, and here's all these like people from Waterford filling up a floor off the New World Trade Center building, talking about a technology that we really tried to back and become a part of a couple of years before,
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been one of those like pinching yourself moments
There's
in life.
been a lot of those moments. Thankfully, the kind of personality type that a bunch of folks at NearForm have is like, we're kind of always trying to accelerate things, and it could be a blessing and a curse. Like, you're going, wow, that's awesome. Like, and you're kind of like, hair standing up in the back of your neck thinking about this thing, and then you're going, right, we did that. What's next? So it's been quite a few of those over the years.
I'm sure you're all very high achievers in the company, from what I can see.
Yeah. An interesting thing actually that we have at NearForm is this kind of a vocational type of person that you get, both with founders of companies and also with people that get involved in open source and new technologies and stuff. And it's a kind of like vocational core to the company has meant that we just have brilliant people across the board, and people who kind of want to be on a journey of discovery, in their careers, and really get a buzz of working with people that are like-minded and achieving things that they never dreamt they could have achieved. It's quite an infectious kind of dynamic.
Yeah, seems so from where I sit, from the people I've spoken to.
Yeah.
It just seems like your employees really pour their heart and soul into it. Yeah,
and I think we like it. Stuff comes from the top down, like, and if the founders and the people that who started the business do that, they set the example for everybody else in the business, and like we're in that interesting place where there's more opportunity, than there are people to fulfill the opportunities, and so talented folk can, like, we everybody can make really good money in their careers. So if you put that to one side, it's like, well, what else do you want to do in your career? And if what you want to do is you want to learn and be inspired, then that's kind of what we offer people.
Yeah. And that's resulted in, the ability to recruit talent. I think access to talent is one of the biggest hurdles for any technology company.
Like we've never used a recruiter ever, and
wow.
the level of people we have in our organization are just brilliant. There's nobody like hiding behind a desk, kind of not doing what they should be doing and stuff. Everyone is up for it, and everybody enjoys what they're doing,
Absolutely. I was curious about the name NearForm. Was that something brilliant, or was that just, there's not already a company called NearForm, so we're going to take that brand?
Possibly yes to both. It is. I spent a good bit of time navel gazing before setting up the company, and the one of the things I think that people don't understand in the world these days is that software is never done. Like, if you build a piece of software, it's not like building a piece of sculpture, and when you're finished the last, like, with a chisel on the last piece, then there's your piece of sculpture. Like, software is something that keeps moving all the time because it's fundamentally attached to people and their behavior, and so software is never done, and it's always in a state of flux, and that's where the name NearForm came from. Like, we're always like honing in on that shape that is a desired state for a piece of software, but it always moves.
That's very interesting that's where you came up with it. So we talked a little bit about what the company values are and the types of people that you have working for you. So just a more personal question. I'm wondering if, now that you're CEO of a growing, larger organization, do you still have time to sit down and actually write code yourself?
No. I haven't written code in about 10 years. I sometimes think about it, though, and I'm getting a bit closer to having a work-life balance where I can actually, have some kind of good hours in the day when I can look to write code. It's something that I've tried to do, but to be honest, like the last 6-7 years of my life have been just about struggling, just about keeping all the plates spinning. So in tandem with starting NearForm, I had my first child, my daughter Rita, 8 months before I started the company, and then I spent like 5 years over and back to the US, kind of every second week, and then we had twins. So I've got twin boys at home and stuff like that, and
Wow.
code is just not. It's a luxury that I can't. I didn't have time to afford. But I will, and I think the funny thing with NearForm is, when the people at NearForm see what a bad coder I am at this stage, they'll probably all be horrified.
Well, I was just about to say, by the time you get back to it, you'll probably be coding in a completely different way.
Yeah.
So another question just about your culture. I wondered whether the company has a dress code.
And if we're going to meet a customer, we have to have some, smart casual type thing, just because, you have to respect their dress code and stuff like that. But other than that, it's like whatever you're comfortable in is fine by me.
Yeah. One of my other questions was going to be about keeping people happy. And I think it's already becoming obvious just in this chat about, people's talent is the most important thing. It's not all of these other silly trappings of professional life, like needing to wear a suit, that's important.
Yeah. I mean, the way I think about these things, we have a real opportunity. The people that live in the world today, to be really fulfilled in our lives and work on things that we're interested in working on, and be able to spend time with our families and all that stuff. And it's like, when you think about it, like from the ages of whatever 20-ish to whenever a person decides to retire, like they're the prime years of your life, and you spend 5 days a week working, probably the best waking hours that you have. So we really have a duty to try and make that as fulfilling an experience as possible for people, because we're all going to be vapor one day. So it's really important that people have an experience when they're working.
Yeah. And I think it only just strengthens the organization when your employees are bought in.
Yeah.
To the vision.
Yeah, I'm very lucky.
I think that's a really nice note to end on, because I know that the true assets of NearForm are its people, and that ethos has really come out in all of my dealings with NearForm. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Hope everybody listening to this podcast has a nice day, and that this has added something to it.
Perhaps if someone is listening today and they love the sound of NearForm, could they send in their CV?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you can send a CV to info@NearForm or careers@NearForm, and if you want to work with a really nice group of people who get it and want to do something new and interesting, then that's what you're applying to.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Cian. It was so interesting. It was really lovely to hear you opening up about founding the company, everything from the language that you're coding in right through to your own personal life, and how things have gone since the company began in 2011, 2012. So I just want to say thank you so much to you, Cian, and thank you to all of our listeners. And please make sure you check out nearform.com. There will be more podcasts in this series. We've only just kind of gotten going with our podcast series, so there will be more coming. There's also a lot of really interesting blog posts on NearForm. So definitely check out the blog. There's everything from insights into open source to transforming the culture of an organization. So definitely check out the website. And as Cian mentioned, there will be recruiting information on there as well.
Cool.
So thank you so much.
Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.